This video is a quick review of our trip to Holland as a whole, sort of really just thinking about what went well and any even better ifs for next season. So we had two crew on board. Our Westerly Seahawk 35 was quite capable of managing the 25-hour crossing. So we started off going from the river Blackwater and then hopped up to Harwich and then sailed above the East Anglia 1 wind farm. And the thinking behind that was this area here to the southeast of the East Anglia 1 wind farm is pretty hectic. There's a lot of traffic, a lot of shipping coming in from different directions. So this area to the west of the farm is a lot quieter. You get the odd fishing boat, but I've sailed up and down here before and it is a lot quieter than to the east of it. So we left in the evening to catch the northbound tide and then really crossed over this TSS in the night and then sailed across to the east in daylight, crossing these shipping lines in daylight and arriving in the evening. And for two people it was 22 knots plus. It was kind of a headwind rather than a following wind, so it was quite a lumpy crossing if I'm honest, and with two crew doing sort of 3 hours shifts, it got quite tiring towards the end, and I was very glad to get into port. The route itself worked very well. It was a good plan to catch the tide going north here. We were doing like 7-8 knots over the ground coming up here, and then because the tide's pushing north and south and we were going east, it wasn't against us, so we just allowed the current to push us a bit in one direction and then it would cancel itself out as the water pushed back the other way a few hours later. There were some restrictions. You've got to cross these shipping lanes at right angles, and there are some oil rigs that it would be a terrible shame to bump into if you weren't paying attention. But they're all marked on the map, and the plan, it worked pretty well. There was no sort of shipping to worry about outside of these TSS areas, so as long as we were outside the dotted lines we felt fairly comfortable. This area here was quite interesting as we crossed over. This is a big wind farm and you actually sail relatively close to the perimeter of this wind farm as you're squeezing between the TSS and the wind farm. It's not ridiculously close, they're still like 2 or 3, possibly even more miles away, but they were still clearly visible. And in this area here there's like a parking lot for big tankers that you have to sail past as well, but again it was nothing to worry about. We didn't have any worries about moving ships in this area, although as you approach the port entrance you do have to keep a clear look over your shoulder because you do get some big ships passing into IJmuiden and heading on into the North Sea Canal. The Seaport Marina was a really good choice as a destination, so once we got in you're able to take your sails down in this outer harbour, again just watching out for commercial shipping. But there's plenty of room in here. There was a swell sort of blowing in a bit, but once we got to this second breakwater here, I think we actually took our sails down in this section here, so the boat wasn't moving around quite so much. We were quite tired, remember, so I just was trying to avoid any silly mistakes at the last moment. But plenty of room to manoeuvre, and then we were into the Seaport Marina, and this was a good destination for tired crew. If for some reason the voyage took longer than planned, we could easily have made this at night. As it was, we got in evening daylight, but I would have no concerns about trying to get into here at night if I needed to. It was quite windy, and we ended up going down to one of these visitor berths at the end here, and it was a crosswind, so these box sort of finger berths with posts that you have to sort of hook on your way past are quite fiddly, and we weren't the only boat to have to sort of play some fun and games to try and make sure we weren't blown across the post and various things like that, but we got in. It's all completely automated. You scan on the pontoon, there's a QR code that you scan, and you pay through the app, and you get emailed any gate codes that you need. Facilities were fine, showers were good, and it's worth noting that this fuel berth here is 24-hour, completely automated. You pay by card, and that was quite useful when we were coming back at the end of our trip. At out of office hours, we were able to fill up the diesel tanks before jumping off the next day. There isn't much, how some marinas are often a sort of hub for various restaurants and bars. It didn't really feel like that. Everything was shut. It wasn't that late in the evening. I think it was like 8 o'clock or something, but there was literally nothing open except for the automated sort of ablutions block actually adjacent to the marina. We did Google it, and you can walk up this pathway through some sand dunes, and there's a couple of eateries here. I can't remember if it was this one or this one, but there was, we had a really nice beer and fish and chips. We were just in time, so just Google it to check the closing times and plan accordingly. So as I say, it was a really good destination. We were quite tired with 2 crew. Ideally, I think I'd like to have 3 crew, because then you could do 2-hour shifts with 4 hours off and 2 hours on, which would be quite nice. As it was, 3 hours felt like a long time in the middle of the night when you're a bit cold and trying not to be feeling seasick and knowing you've got a number of hours still to go. So, everything went to plan, but we were very glad to get in, have a beer and a bite to eat, and then a good night's sleep. We didn't bother checking in passport control, we just crashed out, and then the next morning we left Seaport Marina and went through South Lock, and you basically go through this lock here, not up here. Is it this one? I think it's this one. And then you park up. There's a long line of sort of seawall, canal wall here that you can park up in. You can just park the boat, and then it's about a 15-minute walk back to the DFDS office, which is just to the side of the terminal for people getting the ferry. So you walk down this side road, and there's a glass sliding door. It looked a bit closed when we were there, but there is a buzzer that you can press, and we were told when we were in there that it is 24 hours. They didn't ask for anything except my passport, but I did have all the other documentation that you're supposed to have just in case. So things like ship's radio license, proof of ownership, insurance documentation, stuff like that, but they didn't ask for anything except the passport. So there's a gentle walk back to the boat, and then we're in Holland, we're off. And sailing along the North Sea Canal was a really nice contrast for after our sort of 24-hour sailing across the Channel experience. And just tootling along here, boat speed was about sort of five knots, just taking it easy, which has felt fine. Some of these huge sort of commercial sort of ships carrying gravel and stuff like that can sneak up behind you, so look over your shoulder occasionally. But there was no concerns. It all worked really well. And once you get through the South Lock, there's nothing else to worry about, no locks or anything to worry about until after we get to Amsterdam. And I did quite a lot of research on Amsterdam and where to stay. A lot of people stay, Sixhaven is a famous destination and is on a lot of sailors' sort of to-do lists, but I'd also read that it's quite a small marina and can get quite chock-a-block and can be quite noisy, and lots of rafting up and lots of people in charter boats, and I was a bit unsure about that. I'm sure it would have been lovely, but I just wanted something a little bit calmer, so I carried on past Sixhaven and tried for the Alus Marina here, which was lovely actually, and we did initially get directed to some sort of posts, but we couldn't get through, the hull was too wide, so we ended up rafting up with another boat just on the side here. But it's like an oasis of calm here, it's absolutely lovely, and we were able to sort of put the boat to bed and jump on our folding bikes and then cycle across to here and cross over using the free ferry into Amsterdam for a night of basically Amsterdam tourism. And you had a nice bite to eat and some beers and some cycling around, seeing the sights, and it was just really good fun. And then when we'd had enough of that, it was a very simple matter of crossing that ferry, that free ferry again, and then heading back to the boat for another good night's sleep. The only thing I would watch out for is they have these ferries that zip across from left to right, and they can catch you out. You can sort of get into open canal mode, and you need to be aware that these things can look like they're parked up and then suddenly be charging right at you. So as long as you're aware of that, it's fine. If this Alus Marina is quite small, so if that had been full up, another opportunity would be to go to the Amsterdam Marina, which is back here, which is a big commercial marina and would have been absolutely fine, but I was just looking for something a little bit more quirky. Right, so that was that night. The next morning we sailed off again, saying goodbye to Amsterdam, and you go through the Orange Sluizen lock here, and then straight away, you think you're through free and clear, but actually you're not. There is another lifting bridge here, and there's no real place to park up. A lot of these locks have sort of waiting pontoons. This one didn't, so you just sort of hold station. I've read since that they don't really like you going around in circles and stuff. There was room, but I think the routine is generally to just basically point into the wind and hold station. And then you have to be pretty nippy because they open at 22 and 20 past, and what happens is if you're too late they close it again because there's traffic waiting to get back across. So you go through and then you are free and clear, and then it's a matter of following these posts along the yacht track, which I think is slightly to the left of the commercial track, out into the Markermeer. There is a lovely, I have read that the Durgadam location here is supposed to be a really nice quiet marina, and when I was researching Amsterdam you could actually stay here, and it's only about a 40-minute cycle ride to get back into Amsterdam. So we didn't go there, but it looked very nice and I heard lots of nice things about it, and I that's on my list to go again. But as it was, we sailed past into the Markermeer, and it was really gentle, sunny, nice lake sailing, and I'm sure that this kicks up a swell like the Blackwater as a river can really kick up in quite a nasty way when it's wind against tide. So I'm sure this open expanse of water can generate some rollers under the right conditions, but there's no real current or tide to speak of. The water level's stable, and our experience of it was a really benign, gentle sailing conditions. We were enjoying tweaking our sails to get the best out of the boat, really developing our skills, because there's no waves knocking you around, so you can really start to feel exactly where the stall points are. So that was good fun. We obviously sailed up the Markermere, and we didn't feel constricted at this point to follow any particular route. We were tacking slightly into the wind, so there was lots of sailing around here, and there's not that. We draw 1.5 meters, and I think it was about 3 meters in most areas, so it's not a huge amount of water underneath you, but it's all very flat. We thought about a horn, but in our original plan was to try and get to the islands up here in the Waddenzee, and that meant we had to kind of push on. Also, I heard from people sailing locally, and I'd read that this area is quite bad for bindweed that can bind up your prop, and I've even heard of horror stories where people have had engines jump off their mounts and stuff because this stuff can really do damage to the boat if it gets around your prop. So we didn't go to Horn, although they also said that Horn was an absolutely lovely place to stay, so maybe that will be on the list for next season. So anyway, we sailed north towards Enkhuizen, and a strategy that worked very well for us was to get to our destination just before the lock, and then you do the lock fresh in the morning, coffee in hand, the next day. And we stayed here at Brookhaven, which was absolutely lovely, like really just charming and pretty and quiet. I think we were on the seawall here. There was no swell or anything. There was just the gentle sound of children playing in the water as with people sort of picnics, and there was a beach here, and we could cycle into town, which is a 10-minute cycle ride, and there's pretty castles and lots of history and bars and things, although things didn't seem to open particularly late. If it's a weekday and if it's after 8 o'clock, you don't just assume everything is going to be open everywhere. Might have been a Sunday, I can't remember off the top of my head. Anyway, it was lovely, and we had a nice couple of drinks and a nice bite to eat, and then that was Brookhaven. So next morning, came out of here, don't cut the corner, it gets shallow around here, and then you don't go through this lock, you go through this lock. This is the yacht track. They don't seem to use the VHF much in these parts, like even the marinas and things just expect you to turn up or phone them rather than use the VHF like in the UK. And these, as you arrive, it's either on a fixed schedule or they see you and you either get let through or you wait until there's a couple of other boats waiting and off you go. This one was very simple, it just pretty much opened as we arrived, and then we were out from the Markermere into the IJsselmeer, and this again was a wide open, easy sailing expanse, and we were aiming for Deneuve, basically hoping to stay in this Deneuve marina, and then the next day we were going to go through this lock back out to the seaward side and stay in Texel and perhaps try and get up to Terschelling, sorry, not Texel, Terschel, and then potentially, if the weather played ball, stay in Den Helder and then hop down the coast to IJmuiden and then jump back home from there. as it was, this lock was closed for essential maintenance, and that does happen in Holland, and there are apps that you can use that give you live up-to-date information. We didn't have that, but next year I'll make sure I've done some research on that and found a free app that gives us information on real-time information, because we basically slogged up here and then realised that it was a dead end and we couldn't get through. Of course, we could have sailed this way and tried to cut through possibly here, but that would have added more time to our journey, and in the event we were just like, look, let's enjoy what we've been doing and sail back south through the IJsselmeer and the Markermeer, and back through Amsterdam and back to IJmuiden. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So after a night at Deneuve, we did exactly that. We sailed back. It was spinnaker sailing, really chilled out, sunny day, through the lock, same way we came. We didn't stay in Brookhaven. We actually anchored here. We were happy to not pay the very reasonable prices, a lot cheaper than in the UK. But we had water, we had food, we had beer, so we just anchored out here. Lovely sunset. Went for a swim, and then the next morning we were off back the way we had come, back down to. This was a bit of a slog, to be honest with you, because what we needed to do, because of the time constraints, our holiday window, is we needed to go all the way from here, just sort of near Enkhuizen, all the way down here, all the way through Amsterdam, all the way through the North Sea Canal, stopping at Southlock to get our passport stamped, and then staying the night in Seaport Marina, ready for jumping across the channel the next morning. And it was doable, but it was quite a lot of sailing, quite a lot of motoring. If I had had more time, I might have broken it up by staying at Durgedam, for example, but that would have been another day, which we didn't have. So we've already talked about all of our experience of Amsterdam and stuff, and we've talked about the crossing of the channel. So a little note on navigation. So the main app I use is the Navionics app. Now, I've used Navionics for a long time, and it is a fantastic app and well worth the 30 odd quid for it. They have undermined its value to a degree since it got taken over by Garmin. They've got all this stuff on the left hand side. This is the web app we're looking at here, not the actual app you'd use on your tablet. And it used to be that you could do your route planning on a big screen, say on a laptop, and save it through the web app, and then those routes would move across. You could, through the cloud, move them across to your tablet app, and you can't do that anymore. For some reason, they feel that it's reasonable to not do that. So what I had to do was buy a bigger tablet, and the other thing that's annoying is that they only allow 2 devices to log in on the same login. So I like to have it on my tablet, and I've got a sort of like a car screen tablet, sort of, I use as a cheap plotter under the hood on the boat, which I also like to use. And I also quite like it to have it on my phone, so that when I'm down below off watch, I can sort of crack an eyelid open and check we're in the right direction and so on. And I can't do that properly anymore with a single user license, which I think is detrimental to safety. I understand that they want to charge for their product, and it is a good product, but it's really annoying that you can't do that anymore. It is still a good app though, and it used to be if we were looking at the tablet version, you'd have lots of arrows showing you the currents, and you can click on things to see what the tides are, even for a couple of years ahead or something, so you can plan next season knowing what the tides are going to be. And it's what I use for my navigation and route planning. The other thing I used for the first time this year was the Captain's Mate app, which is the Cruising Association app. Now, I haven't been a member of the Cruising Association for a number of years, but I did it this year because I wanted another source of information about sailing through Holland, and there was some really interesting articles in the Cruising Association, and this web app is really quite cool. It is probably doesn't do any more in terms of planning a cross-channel trip in the way that Navionics done. I'd still use Navionics, but if you're trying to decide what marina to stay at, or if you want to sort of get some local knowledge on different information about the whether you VHF or what facilities there are, you've got the information that is shared in the app. But, many places also have reviews from Cruising Association members that provide you with lots of very useful information. So I really used this Cruising Association app, Captain's Mate app, quite a lot for digging out information about particular locations, particularly when I was on the move and fine-tuning my plans. So this information is not available in the Navionics map, and together they provided really good information, quite a powerful package working alongside each other. So the Cruising Association, I think, to join, pay an annual fee is about £160. There are discounts at various places to say, so we'll see whether it turns out to be a long-term value for money, but I think it was well worth it for what I needed and the peace of mind it gave me getting into new ports. So I really enjoyed my 10-day trip to Holland, and I really would recommend it for anybody that has perhaps already done France and wants to do something a little bit more challenging. The going across the channel and then into inland waterways is a really nice contrast. I probably will do it next season because I feel like I've only scratched the surface, and we'll pretty much do it exactly the same. The only difference might be, instead of doing a dogleg to Harwich and then above the East Anglia wind farm, is to save a bit of time, depending on weather of course, I might just go direct from my home port on the Blackwater and then just underneath the wind farm, and then cross over this TSS here and then sail northeast to track up to the same latitude as I was this previous trip, and then track as I did before eastwards to Imuden. And that, if you believe Navionics, is pretty much the same journey time as the going from Harwich to Imuden above this wind farm. The only question I have is, this is a bit of a conveyor, so if you use the tide right, you can get a couple of knots that'll swoosh you up here, whereas if you're going sort of diagonally, you possibly won't be able to get the benefit of that tidal push as much. So, and also you're sort of a bit closer to shipping traffic here and here, so it might mean a slightly more complex night, watching out for shipping and AIS signatures and things like that. But I suspect that's what I'm going to do next season, is try going under the farm and seeing if we can save a day not going to Harwich and going direct from the home port. I mean, last trip it was quite nice to do a short leg first, because it was one of our first trips of the season, and Hawkeye's an old boat with an original engine. It's very reliable and gets loved and well looked after and serviced and everything, but it's always nice when it's early in the season to do a short leg, just to make sure there's no gremlins before we start getting out into the channel proper. It's also good as a sort of shakedown for any crew on board to make sure they're familiar with the boat before you're in the middle of the ocean at night. But that said, it's nice to save a day, so I think that's what I'm going to do and I think probably we'll do the same thing that we did this year and go into the North Sea Canal and to Amsterdam, rather than spend a night at Seaport and hop up the coast and then come down. But well, a lot depends on the weather, but that is my plan at the moment, and probably spend a night in Amsterdam, then enjoy the Markham Mill, maybe not try and get up to the islands at Texel and so on, just enjoy shorter hops, tootling about here, a couple of hours here and there, maybe a night or two out at anchor, and then on the return, as we loop back, maybe stay a night at Durgadam. And what I might do, what I'm looking at right now, is there is something called the standing mast route, the SMR route, where you can take the boat mast up through canals from Amsterdam to Vlissingen. Okay, so it takes, as far as I can tell at the moment, about 3 days of sort of sailing, maybe motoring about 6 hours a day to Vlissingen, and it's all through canals. So I might drop my crew at Amsterdam or possibly Rotterdam. They will get the train or home or the ferry home, and then I might solo, could be quite fun, soloing to Vlissingen and then hopping down the coast to Newport, and then jumping across to Ramsgate, and then I'm in home waters, and it'll be easy sail back to the Blackwater from there. I know some people do it, but I'm not sure I'm up for a 24 hour crossing solo across busy shipping lanes and the cross channel. I think I'd get pretty tired after about 10 hours and it would just stop being fun. So through the canals to Vliss, and then hopping down the coast, and then across to Ramsgate, and then back home from there is my current thinking for next year. Anyway, enough rambling. I hope this has been some use to you. Happy sailing.